It was late. One of those nights where the parking lot lights feel harsher than they need to be, like they're judging you for still being awake. I was sitting in my car with the engine running, phone in my hand, scrolling through receipts I didn't remember earning. Nothing dramatic. $15 here, $22 there, stuff that barely registered because it all felt normal. I wasn't shocked or annoyed or even curious. I just kept scrolling, half listening to the engine hum, telling myself I'd look closer later. What stuck with me wasn't what I bought, but how little resistance there was. I wasn't buying anything exciting. I was buying the feeling of not dealing with one more thing. In that moment, comfort didn't feel like a luxury. It felt like maintenance, like something you quietly pay for when you're too tired to argue with yourself. And I remember thinking, without really finishing the thought, when did this start feeling automatic? Somewhere along the way, easy started to feel more important than cheap. I didn't announce that decision or even notice it happening. I just started paying extra to make things smoother. Delivery instead of pickup. Pre-cut instead of whole. The slightly faster option, the slightly nicer version. Each choice felt small, almost responsible in a weird way, like I was protecting my limited energy. I told myself I wasn't being careless, just realistic. After long days, friction felt expensive in a way money didn't. Standing in line, cooking, waiting, those things felt heavier than a few extra dollars. And because the charges were spread out, they never landed with any force. $5 here doesn't feel like a choice worth debating. But over time, I realized I was quietly agreeing to a higher cost of living without ever checking the price. Not because I wanted more, but because I didn't want to feel worn down. And that part took me longer to admit than I expected. I started noticing it with subscriptions. Not the obvious ones I actually used, but the quiet background ones. The app I downloaded for one problem night. The streaming service I meant to cancel after a free trial. $10, $12, sometimes more. They blended into the month so smoothly that they stopped feeling like spending at all, just part of the noise. When I finally scrolled through my statements slowly, I realized some of them had been there for years. Years. That was the uncomfortable part. Not the amount, but the time. Canceling felt weirdly heavier than paying, like it required a level of attention I didn't have. So I kept paying for the comfort of not thinking about it. And that felt fine, until it didn't. Food was where it really showed up. Not nice dinners or celebrations, just ordinary tired food. Takeout on nights I didn't feel like cooking. Delivery because the couch felt far away from the door. $18, $24, plus fees. I'd tell myself it was cheaper than going out. Cheaper than burning out, cheaper than being annoyed. Then one night, I did the math. 4 nights a week at about $20 is $80 a week. That's over $4,000 a year. That number didn't yell at me. It just sat there heavy. I remember staring at it and thinking how reasonable each order felt on its own. None of them felt like a mistake. Together, they felt like something I'd been avoiding looking at. Gas station stops were another one. I'd pull in for fuel and walk out with a drink, a snack. Maybe something sweet I didn't plan on buying. $5 here, $7 there. It felt harmless, almost polite, like a little reward for surviving traffic or a long day. But it wasn't occasional. It was routine. When something happens often enough, it stops feeling optional. It just becomes part of the trip. I didn't think of it as spending. I thought of it as normal. Later, when I added it up over a month, the total surprised me more than it should have. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I couldn't remember choosing it. Credit cards made everything smoother. Too smooth, maybe. Minimum payments felt friendly, manageable, a number small enough not to disrupt anything. I told myself I'd pay more when things settled down, but things don't really settle down, do they? They just change shape. Interest became the quiet fee I paid for staying comfortable in the moment. Opening statements felt unpleasant, so I didn't linger. As long as the balance wasn't exploding, I felt fine. It took a while to admit that fine was costing me more than I thought. Comfort, again, had a price tag I wasn't reading. Upgrades were sneaky, a little more storage, a slightly better model, nothing extravagant, just enough to avoid feeling limited. The base option started to feel like a compromise, even though it used to be normal. I remember clicking the upgrade button without hesitation, telling myself it wasn't that much more. And it wasn't, not once. But over years, I realized how often I paid extra just to avoid mild inconvenience. Comfort resets your baseline. What once felt like plenty starts to feel tight, and you don't notice the shift while it's happening. Rent was the big one I defended hardest. Paying more for peace, quieter street, shorter commute, fewer things to worry about. I framed it as mental health, as stability as being an adult, and maybe some of that was true. But when I calculated the difference between what I paid and what I could have paid, the yearly number landed heavier than expected. I didn't regret my choice exactly. I just realized how expensive calm can be when you rent it by the month, and how rarely I checked whether it was delivering what I thought I was buying. Social spending didn't feel like spending at all. Saying yes to dinner, drinks, group plans, I wasn't excited about but didn't want to explain my way out of. It was easier to go along, easier to split the bill, easier to keep things smooth. I didn't feel pressured exactly, just gently nudged by the desire not to be the difficult one. Over time, those yeses added up. And what bothered me wasn't the money. It was realizing how often I paid to avoid a small moment of awkwardness. This was the part I didn't want to look at first. Not any single habit, but all of them together. When I added everything up, subscriptions, food, fees, little upgrades, the total didn't feel reckless. It felt normal. That was the problem. None of it was dramatic enough to stop me. But combined, it explained a lot. Why money felt tighter than it should. Why raises didn't change much. It wasn't one bad decision, it was 1,000 small ones made in the name of comfort. Convenience fees were everywhere once I started noticing them. Delivery fees, service charges, priority processing, paying extra to wait less. I told myself time was valuable, which was true. But I didn't always ask if I was actually saving time or just avoiding minor annoyance. The fees felt like tolls on everyday life, small enough to ignore, frequent enough to matter. And I paid them without thinking because thinking felt like work. Work lunches and coffee runs were part of the rhythm of my days. A drink on the way in, lunch out because everyone else was doing it. 10 here, 15 there. It felt essential, like fuel. One afternoon I multiplied it out. About $15 a day, 20 days a month, $300. That number surprised me more than it should have. Not because it was outrageous, but because I'd never really seen it as a number before. Automatic renewals felt almost designed to disappear. I'd see a charge and squint at it, trying to remember what it was for. Sometimes I couldn't. Forgetting became part of the system. I realized how profitable inattention is. Comfort includes not having to remember, and I paid for that privilege every month. There was a strange sense of control that came with small indulgences. Like, choosing something nice proved I wasn't stuck. But over time, I noticed how those choices limited me later. Comfort felt empowering in the moment, restrictive over time. That disconnect bothered me. I didn't feel out of control. I felt gently boxed in. What really got me was how little changed. Spending went up. Comfort increased. But happiness stayed mostly the same. The floor rose, not the ceiling. I expected some kind of emotional return that never quite arrived. That realization sat with me longer than the numbers did. I borrowed my idea of normal from other people without realizing it. What they paid, what they upgraded, what they shrugged off. Normal became expensive once I copied it. And it felt invisible because no one talks about the cost part. Just the lifestyle part. One habit finally forced the math. $5 a day doesn't sound like much, but $5 a day is about $1,800 a year. Over 20 years, that's $36,000. That number didn't accuse me, it just existed. And I couldn't unsee it after that. I started thinking about fatigue differently. How tired people spend. How exhaustion makes comfort feel necessary. There's a cost to being worn down, and it shows up quietly on your statements. Money conversations don't usually include energy, but they probably should. I didn't feel panic or regret exactly. Just a low hum of unease. Nothing was broken. Nothing was extreme. It was all ordinary. And that made it harder to talk about. Comfort doesn't announce itself as a problem. It just slowly fills the space. The number I can't shake now isn't big on paper. A few $100s a month, that's it. But when I sit with it, I feel its weight. Not because I don't have it, but because I know where it went. And some nights, when things are quiet, that number shows up before sleep does.